I'm here with Marti Macinski of Standing Stone Winery, and we are at her old vine Riesling vineyard at the edge of the vineyard. So what do you want? When was it planted, Marti?
These vines were planted in 1972 by Charles Fournier, who's a name that many people know around here, but also Guy Deveau. And because he got shipped to the other coast, not as many people connect him with New York wines. But
those are famous figures in the history of winemaking.
And the story is that they spent 3 years, unlike other people who were sort of entrepreneurial, plant it and will it to grow. Gold Seal was a big company and they couldn't just take a chance. So they did 3 years of research and they had 100 test sites on Cayuga, and Seneca Lake. And they looked in holes when it rained to see how fast the water drained out. They would actually go and have somebody say, okay, it rained, how fast are we drying off? Because the molds and mildews, as long as we have a good breeze, those can go away. When it got cold, unlike today where we can put a computer out there and see what's going on, somebody stood there with a stopwatch and said, how long is it cold? Because even then, they didn't have as much research. They didn't know, for instance, that Riesling can stand 10 degrees below zero for 10 or 12 hours, but not much more. Or Merlot can stand a little bit below zero, but only for about an hour. But I think intuitively they knew that they needed to know how long when it got below zero it stayed there. And
so you had a jump on the research.
Yes.
This is one of the original plants?
You never totally know, because every year, you know, we are in the Finger Lakes. It does get cold. Sometimes we have trunk damage from freezing. Sometimes our tractors going up and down and around these hills and vales take out a vine here and there. But what we're always doing, we're pretty sure that most of this is the rootstock that was first planted and at least the base of the graft. And then, for instance, if this year, when we're pruning, if we were to see a little shoot coming up, seeing how old and thick this trunk is, we might actually bring a renewal up. And then 3 or 4 years from now, we've got insurance, basically. So you tend not to see single trunks in the Finger Lakes because of that. We can't afford the risk of single trunks, because if one goes, we're done with that vine and we have to start over. If, on the other hand, we always have 2 or 3 things waiting in case the big old guy has a problem, now we're ready to move on. And so it's sort of a philosophy question. Is it an old vine? Is it a new vine?
Okay.
But the roots are probably very well established on most of our vines. Probably every 5 to 6 years we put in 3 to 4% of the vineyard needs replacing. Where just something has gone wrong enough, a renewal hasn't worked. Like if you really look closely at this one over here, I can see it. You can see a little bitty hole right through here. He's starting to get, you can almost right through. And so that guy probably is going to need some help a few years from now. And if there isn't a renewal, and that's another sign of their age, when they get too old, if there isn't a renewal, there might not be. And then we would have to replace the vine. So that's why whenever we see renewals, we tend to seize on them and bring them up.
Because you don't want to lose the vine.
Correct.
Good eyes. Only
So, yes.
only a seasoned vineyard manager would notice that little hole down there. Now look at the grapes. How far away are these grapes from being harvested? They're beautiful.
They're
Riesling.
gorgeous, aren't they? We think, it's always hard to say because the weather changes. Today it's going to be 90 and tomorrow they're telling us 60. But they're at about 18.5 bricks, and we usually like to see with Riesling something over 20. We don't get the kind of high bricks levels they do in California, but with Riesling, what we look for is flavor, not as much sugar, bricks sugar, because we can actually add some sugar if we need to, but we want certain flavors. And these are still definitely tasting very green apple-y, which is a sign to us that they're just not ready yet. And the other thing we look at carefully is the pH, which is a measurement of the acid. And these are still under 3 pH, which says the acidity is through the roof. And so it probably would be a pretty tart wine if we picked them right now. If we had to, if there was a disaster coming, we might think about it. But if you look, one of the tests when I was talking to you about picking the Pinot, one of the tests is we just run around and shake. And you lose 1 or 2 berries and see that one is already squishy. So something had damaged, maybe a bird, maybe it got hit. But most of them are hanging pretty tight.
Yeah,
and there's
they're hanging
nothing
right
that's
on the bunch.
shriveled. There's nothing starting to shrivel or drying out. So there's no signs, the leaves aren't yellowing. These are really nice and green. Where if you look at the Pinot vineyard that got picked last Saturday, along the fruit zone, the vines are yellowing. It's like they've said, we're done. we're done. And when you see the yellowing before you've picked, you know you're starting to run out of ability to ripen.
The time.
But we've got lots of green here, so we're not in a rush, and that's kind of nice because our big fear 2 weeks ago was that everything would come in at once and it would be really tough to manage.
Because it's been such a warm summer.
Yes, so it's kind of nice to know that we might not have to pick these for 2 weeks, and we've got some other things to do in the meantime.